Hello, and welcome to We Live for Saturday, your favorite college football podcast. I'm your co-host, Mike, and with me, as always, is your other co-host, John. John, how you doing this evening?
Well, I was doing okay, and I felt like I was getting over the loss, to a point. I mean, I was still upset, but I was getting over it
Sure.
until some news just came out that I was able to see on Twitter about how the Big Ten is now going to change the way they look at the kickoffs, I guess, and throwing those flags and how the end, basically addressing the end of the Minnesota Michigan game, and too little, too late.
So, yeah, to catch you up if you missed it, and we'll talk about it more in depth, but essentially Minnesota scored a touchdown to get down 3 against Michigan and then successfully executed an onside kick. And there was a flag thrown despite the fact that replay showed clearly that Minnesota was not offsides.
Yes.
So the flag was thrown for offsides. Minnesota has to re-kick the onside kick. An onside kick is something you're going to recover at most like 9% of the time. So like you're not going to you recover one kick, you're not going to recover another one.
Yep.
It's just not going to happen. You're not going to get, because you need to get that right bounce, and you need somebody on the receiving team to kind of make a mistake. And you just need those things to happen. So that's just not going to happen twice in a row. So Minnesota missed out on a chance to have the ball on the 38-yard line with 95 seconds left.
Yeah.
To beat Michigan down 3. So yeah.
Yeah. I mean, at least tie it up and go into overtime. There would have been a shot.
Worst case scenario, but man, it was 1st and 10 from Michigan's 38, and Minnesota had just scored 3 touchdowns.
Yep.
So they were hot.
Yep, yeah. Absolutely. So, but now we'll never know.
We won't know. No.
And, Michigan.
Which, we only get 12 games. So when you have the officials decide the outcome of any of them,
yeah,
I think it's kind of a bad deal.
I agree.
And especially when it seems questionable and favors the team that's more highly rated, or the quote unquote bigger brand.
Yeah, no, I totally agree, man.
I mean, you saw that with Virginia Tech, Miami. Virginia Tech throws a Hail Mary, they call it a touchdown on the field, and then somehow, despite the fact that there was no clear view, of that play, they overturned it and said a Miami player touched the ball or something well out of bounds, and somehow that happened, and so the catch didn't count, and they overturned it. And it's like, if the roles are reversed, that's the thing. That's a good guy who sits next to me, actually, in our friend of the podcast, Max, who said, well, one of Max. We have multiple friends of the podcast named Max.
Yes.
This is Max. This is Max who sits next to me in our season tickets. And he said, if you reverse that, do you think there's a world where Minnesota ever gets that call on Michigan? Or is it absolutely Michigan's ball, no questions asked every time? And it's worth questioning. And it's just, I'm sorry, like, I'm not the one usually to go in on officials, but when you've been watching this conference as long as you have, and the bottom line is, look, Ohio State and Michigan fans, I love you. But the truth is, Ohio State and Michigan get calls in this conference in a way that is totally obscene. Yeah. They get calls. They're already the most talented teams. But then on top of that, they get calls that they have no business getting.
No, it's true. And the other point of this reality is that the conference, the Big Ten wants to get as many teams into the college football playoff as possible.
Yes.
And if Michigan had gone down, that is one team that will probably not make it in, and one less team that will probably make it in, period, because who else is going to make that jump at this point? We don't know. Maybe somebody could, but then it would probably drop down to only Ohio State and Penn State. So,
and Oregon.
And Oregon, yes. So the Big Ten wants to get 4 teams, and which we'll actually talk about more here in a minute. But that's what they want. And so, of course, the narrative of Michigan losing to Minnesota is not going to push that forward. So that's the way it goes, man. And that's the way it's going to continue when it comes to those kinds of programs within the Big Ten or within the SEC or any conference for that matter.
It happens in every conference. It's not just the Big Ten.
Yeah.
But you see, there's a handful of brands in college football, your Alabamas, your Georgias, your Texases, who just get those calls.
That's the way it goes. Yep. It's not right.
No.
But that's how it's been for a long time. And it's not probably ever going to change. So.
No. But hopefully this particular way of losing a game will no longer be a problem.
Yes.
Hopefully this particular way of taking away a legitimate onside kick, hopefully we don't see that again anymore.
Yeah.
Because they're changing the way they officiate them and having multiple officials on the line who can judge offsides.
Yeah, I'm no expert on like when it comes to officiating, but like, and I know it's not an easy job.
No,
but it
tough
definitely job. You're seeing a lot of people, and I don't know if more so than before, but like the officiating being particularly poor, whether it's just in this conference or across the board. And I'm not going to sit here and attest to that's the truth. It just seems to be a very loud thing. And I know fans in general are just always mad at the officials for lots of reasons, whether it's real or not. But I don't know, man. I mean, sometimes it does. I do see a lot of bad calls every week. And to me, some of them seem pretty egregious. I understand here and there, like you miss a bad call. There's a bad call and whatever, and you miss it and it's pretty egregious. But like, it seems pretty consistent throughout every week.
I'm okay with the calls you miss. What bothers me is when they make a call that clearly isn't there.
Yeah, sure.
Like the offsides, like Minnesota, the phantom offsides where Minnesota was clearly not offsides.
Mm-hmm.
Like when they call a holding and you go back on the replay and the block, it was just a really good block.
Yeah.
That happens where like a guy gets pancaked and they're like, oh, holding. And it's like, no, he just crushed him.
Yeah.
So like, those are the ones that I think are, it's one, you're not going to catch everything. You just aren't.
Sure.
So I understand missing calls sometimes, but when you make a call that's just not there, that drives me crazy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, I'm with you. It's not fair. It is what it is, though. And you and I are not going to hold onto this for the next year and make this our identity or anything like that. We're gonna move on.
We'll move on. But I'm still mad about the 2015 Michigan game, so I'm not going to forget.
No, exactly.
We're going to move on. I'm not going to talk about it anymore after today. But like, you can bet the next time we play Michigan, I'm going to be thinking about it.
Yeah.
The whole run up to the game.
Yeah. I'm not. I mean, I know there's certain fan bases who love to make it their identity for a full year or more about.
But I'm not going to talk a bunch of. I'm not going to be ridiculous about it. I'm not going to be out of control about it. I made my point for a few days, and I'm going to let it go.
Yeah, me too. Yeah, I'm teasing some of our fellow Hawkeye fans, but we got.
I caught that, John. I think they did too.
Oh, was it not subtle? Oh,
it wasn't super subtle. It was not. Not like you imagined it.
Oh, darn.
You're subtle the way like a 3-year-old subtle when they think they're pulling one over on you.
Darn. Oh, shoot. Oh,
yeah.
All right. But no, moving on, actually, which we were touching on with the college football playoff and the Big Ten wanting to get 4 teams in. Well, there is a new some meeting that happened today between the SEC and the Big Ten that was talking about a scheduling agreement first of all, but then also speaking about getting 4 teams, 4 auto bids for both the SEC and the Big Ten, which is being talked about. I don't think it's decided or anything like that this is happening. Obviously that's probably been the play for a long time. Seeing that really in reality, this is a power 2 college football world we live in now, not a power 4.
Financially, yeah.
Financially, yes. And the way it works, whether it's right or not, the people with the money make the moves, they make the choices,
they make the rules.
That's the Big Ten and that's the SEC right now.
Yep.
I frankly don't agree with it as much as like it is like, okay, that would technically benefit the Big Ten having 4 auto bids, but I prefer conference champions, man. Like that's just the way it should be.
I don't think the SEC and the Big Ten need 4 auto bids
because
they're going to have the highest rated teams anyway.
Mm-hmm.
And so they're going to have more chances for other teams to play highly rated teams.
Yeah.
So because the strength of schedules will be tougher, the teams that are at the top of that league every year are going to be highly ranked. They just are.
Yep.
So I just don't think, I think it's kind of short-sighted. I think it would turn off a lot of people.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think it's necessary, because I think the Big Ten and the SEC are going to get those teams in. The SEC for sure, because they have a stranglehold on the rankings.
Yeah.
But even the Big Ten does pretty well in
Yeah.
the rankings generally. So
Yeah.
I think they're going to be just fine. And I think this seems like overreach.
No, I totally agree. I think it's overreach, and it's a not unnecessary power move. Now what with the scheduling agreement, I don't know exactly all of what's being discussed about that, but like I mean, are they talking about like a Big Ten SEC like challenge week or something, like where it's just each Big Ten team plays a comparable SEC, whatever they think is a comparable SEC team? I don't know. I mean, that's something I know people have thrown around too, that idea, which could be interesting.
That's like a basketball scheduling idea.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I think it's interesting. I don't know if I like it or hate it. I'm kind of indifferent at this point, but
I hate it.
Yeah,
I'll be honest. I don't like it. I think teams need autonomy to decide on their out of conference schedules.
Sure.
I think they do. And I think, like, if let's say you're Purdue right now.
Yeah.
Or you're a Northwestern and you're looking at scheduling ahead. Do you want an SEC team on your schedule in addition to having to play 9 Big Ten teams if you're trying to just get to a bowl game?
Yeah.
I think you don't. So, like, I think this would be a great thing. Like, yeah, people will be like, oh, it'll be fun, and the power brands and blah, blah, blah. And, Ohio State, Alabama, and Michigan, Georgia. And like, I get the appeal. I do.
Sure.
But I don't think that it's something they should be requiring. If you wanted to like opt into it.
Sure.
Because we also have leagues that have different numbers of teams.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not like you can just go 1 for 1 all the way down the line anyway.
Yeah. I think it's, again, this is all being ran by the TV networks. That's going to get ratings, that kind of idea, which is obviously what they do with basketball, and it works.
Yeah.
So that's probably why, I mean, the only reason that's being thrown out there is,
I'm sure it'll happen. I just don't want to see that every year for any reason.
Sure.
Like, I don't want to be like, oh, great, which random SEC team do we have to play? You know what I mean? Like, I like playing. Minnesota's played has had a nice diversity in the out of conference games they played, playing teams from different conferences all over the country.
Which I like that.
Yeah, whether that's SEC, Pac-12, or Big 12, what was the Pac?
Yeah.
The Big 12, ACC. Just finished the ACC series. They've got a couple SEC series coming up. They've got I guess another ACC series now that Cal's in the ACC.
Oh yeah, that's right.
I was like, what's Cal again?
Yeah.
It's like, yeah. But the point is, I just don't think it's in the best interest of most of the teams in the league to have them play a comparable SEC opponent on top of 9 conference games. We play 9 conference games.
Well, we do. The SEC doesn't.
That's what I'm saying. So if the SEC can afford it.
Yeah.
The SEC can afford to add an app because they're still only playing 9 Power 5 conference teams then, probably.
True. Yep. Yeah.
Whereas the Big Ten, then you're talking about 10.
Mm-hmm.
Which a lot of Big Ten teams are doing already, but I just think against the SEC, where it's going to be tough matchups it's going to be tough games all the way across the board. Teams that need to schedule themselves wins are not going to be able to just schedule themselves wins.
Yeah. Yep. Well, it'll be interesting, whatever transpires here. Obviously, we, like I said, we know who's calling the shots here, and it's obviously the Big Ten and the SEC, but above them, it's the TV networks. So whatever they want, they get. We'll see. We're all along for the ride right now for whatever it is. But and another thing I wanted to touch on before we do get into these reviews, by the way, one more thing that I had a big problem with. Someone we've mentioned before on this. Sorry, there's an ambulance going by. Someone else we've mentioned before, and his name is Bud Elliott. And we gotta defend our Hoosiers, I think.
Our Hoosiers.
That's right.
Yes, we do have to defend the Hoosiers because go ahead, tell them what Bud Elliott said.
Well, what Bud Elliott said was he was asked by Tom Fornelli, and I think Danny Kanell was a part of this as well, about would he put a 9-3 Ole Miss into the college football playoff over an 11-1 Indiana Hoosiers, and I'm not going to exactly say, but it's pretty much exactly what he said was yeah, I absolutely would. So, Bud Elliott, Cover 3 podcast, making just amazing take after amazing take and just showing his freaking ass to everyone about his favoritism. And because Ole Miss, the only reason is because Ole Miss is more of a, I guess like you could qualify them more as a helmet school than Indiana. But they're still not really a helmet
school.
They're
not a helmet. Ole Miss is not a helmet school
by any means. But I think he sees it that way.
SEC.
Yeah.
It's the SEC.
And it's the SEC. Yeah.
And it's because Bud Elliott is instinctively defensive about the Big Ten because he's an ACC fan.
Yeah.
Remember, he's the one who spent all summer telling us that Florida State was a top 10 team. Florida State's now what, 1-4?
Yeah. Yep.
Got crushed by SMU.
Yeah. Embarrassed.
By a team that just joined the league.
Yeah.
That's yeah. So he's the guy who told you they were going to be great.
Yep.
And he's telling you that somehow a 9-3 SEC team with like one decent victory is better than going 11-1 in the Big Ten conference with 9 conference games. 9. Because in the ACC and the SEC, they only play 8.
Yeah.
So you're saying, and he said, well, those bottom 9 games were blah, blah, blah. Get out of here. The Big Ten is a gauntlet. I don't care what your schedule is. And yes, does Indiana have an extremely favorable schedule this year? Yeah, they do. Yeah. But you know what? That's how college football works. That's how it works. Some days, some years, things line up for you a little better. You can't punish teams for that. You should celebrate them for that because it finally worked out. Mm-hmm. Indiana hasn't been 5-0 since, I believe, the 1960s.
Yeah.
And they haven't been 6-0 ever.
Yeah.
And they have a chance this weekend. And not just a chance. They're going to be heavily favored this weekend over Northwestern to get to 6-0.
Yep.
And it's
I'm here for it, man.
And if you look at the rest of their schedule, they're going to be favored in all but 3 games.
Yep.
So can they pull an upset and get to? Dude, here's the thing. They said 11-1 Indiana shouldn't get in. I think 10-2 Indiana should be in the discussion.
Yep.
I think if you win 10 games in the Big Ten and people aren't at least talking about you and considering you for a playoff berth, then something went wrong. Because 10 wins in the Big Ten, I don't care if you got the nice schedule draw or not. 10 wins in the Big Ten is ridiculous and should be rewarded.
Well, and it's how you win those games too. Like that's the thing. Indiana is not just like throwing up, basically winning by a field goal.
They're shelling people.
They're destroying people. Exactly. Yeah. So no, like I think that's a joke. I think it's another awful take by this guy who gets paid to probably too good of money. No matter what he's getting paid, it's too much.
Whatever they're paying him, it's too much. Yeah.
And his platform is absolutely he just doesn't deserve to be on that platform. I'm sorry. I will say this forever, and I've been saying this forever because I am proudly blocked by Bud Elliott on Twitter.
You earned that.
Because I freaking did, and I'll do it again. I called him out multiple times, and he didn't want to hear it anymore. And that's the way he handles it, of course, because he doesn't want to hear truth, and so he just wants to stick in whatever his reality that he created for himself, and it's just BS, man. So, I don't think he deserves that platform. I think he's a joke. I think there's definitely other characters on that podcast that I'm not a fan of, but Bud is the most useless one out of the 4, in my opinion.
Yeah.
So I don't.
I guess we should mention that at least Tom Fornelli spoke against him.
Even Danny Kanell did. Danny Kanell did.
Danny Kanell.
Yeah, Danny Kanell laughed and was like, okay, yeah, all right. like I don't know. Anyway.
Every once in a while, Bud goes full Feinbaum.
Yes, he does.
And he went full Feinbaum there.
Yep. So we're all for you, Hoosier fans. and anyone else, like, frankly, that's a ridiculous take. So
did you intentionally reference the Indiana song there? That was nice.
No, I didn't. Oh my gosh.
Indiana, we're all for you.
Oh, wow.
That was nice. I thought that you did that on purpose.
Yes, I did.
I was like,
yes.
yeah. Well
yes,
done.
I did. Yeah,
Snuck it in there. I know that because my partner is an Indiana fan, but also we have our friends over at the All for You podcast.
That's true. Which
is a good podcast for all things Indiana.
So yes, I did do that on purpose. It was very much fun. Yep.
Intentional.
Well, one more thing to add before we get into this, I just want to remind people, if you want to find We Live for Saturday, you can find us on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and Podcast Addict. You can find us on Twitter at We Live for B1GSat. You can find Mike at Alibaba26, and you can find me, John, at Norwegian Gopher. You can also email us, We Live for Saturday, b1g@gmail.com.
Awesome. Should we review these games?
Let's do it.
All right. So first up, the Friday night game, which ended up being a fantastic game.
Yeah.
We had the Rutgers Scarlet Knights 21, the Washington Huskies 18. So this game was defined by mistakes as much as by success, I felt like. Mm-hmm. Washington had a 521 to 299 advantage in total yards, but missed 3 field goals, including the one that would have tied it as the time expired, was penalized 6 times for 69 yards and went 2 for 12 on third downs. Yeah. That is frustrating as all get out when you feel like you played the better offensive game but lost anyway. Yeah. And dude, Washington kicker Grady Gross, I mean, we got to just talk about it right off the bat. 1 for 4. 1 for 4. I mean, that's
gross.
It's
gross.
That's gross. That's good. Nice. Well done. Well done. But that's brutal, man. Yeah, I mean,
it's bad.
Yeah. So they, Rutgers should have at the very least been able to push this game into overtime. And in overtime, they probably have a pretty good, chance. And I think what surprised me the most, John, is that Rutgers did not dominate the line of scrimmage the way I expected them to. Yeah. If anything, I thought Washington was overall winning up front. Like, if I'm going to be totally honest. And that's shocking to me. So to me, that says one of 3 things. Washington's line of scrimmage play is far better than expected. Rutgers' line of scrimmage play isn't as good as we thought. Or Rutgers is better than Washington up front, but played down to the competition a little bit. Mm-hmm. I think it could be like all 3 to some extent.
Yeah.
Like, I think Washington's better than we thought, clearly. Better up front than we thought. But I also think that Rutgers maybe isn't quite as good as we thought, and they also probably didn't have their best game.
Yeah, I think it could be all of the above. I agree. And it is surprising as far as the what's going on up front with Washington, especially their offensive lineman. And it, look, Kyle Monangai and Samuel Brown had some amazing highlight reel runs, and they looked incredible. And Kyle Monangai, especially, like the one that he was just knocking defenders off him left and right for 40 yards or something like that.
Oh yeah. Crazy. He was he was ping ponging off people.
It was amazing. But let's not forget that Jonah Coleman off 16 carries had 148 yards with a 9.3 yard average.
Yeah, dude.
So Jonah Coleman 8, and people are not talking about that.
No, and Monangai had a decent day, but he averaged 5.3 yards a rush.
Exactly.
And had 100. So he had fewer yards rushing and was not nearly as explosive as Jonah Coleman was.
Absolutely. Yeah. On fewer carries, nine more carries, I should say, than Jonah Coleman had.
Yeah.
So it's, and to me, that shows exactly what we talked about with Washington's offensive line. I think they definitely showed up a lot more. I think they looked that they protected Rodgers pretty well. I know his QBR was only 52.7, but he threw for 306 yards with 8.5 yard average and 2 TDs. Not terrible, not a terrible day. And on the flip side with Athan was only 14 out of 24 for 115 yards and 1 TD. but you know, he has a higher QBR, of course, but he didn't have to do as much. So
No.
I think I agree. I think it really came down to the opportunities, the penalties, the fact that Washington's kicker just could not do anything.
Not finish, man. And you know what? To Rutgers' credit, they held up in the, you know, on their side of the field, they held up and forced those kicks. They didn't allow touchdowns.
Yeah, it was very much that bend don't break mentality for sure.
Yes.
Yeah. So it was a great game. You know, I feel for Washington. I think they had a good game plan, and I think they were executing it. It's just tough breaks, undisciplined, bad penalties. So that's the way it went.
It was Mr. Rogers' neighborhood though going on in Piscataway. Threw for over 300 yards, 72% completions, 8.5 yards per attempt, 2 TDs, no picks. That's like pretty solid.
Yeah.
And, you know, Denzel Boston went for 125 and 2 touchdowns. Hunter and Jackson pitched in a little bit. Like, I mean, that's 500 yards of offense.
It's amazing.
Man, 500 yards of offense and you lose. That's rough.
Yeah.
That's that's like a frustrating moment for a Washington team that did everything but win the game. But on the flip side, so here's my question, John. Is it time to be worried about this Rutgers defense a little bit? Because, like, sure, they won the game, but they gave up 500 yards of offense to Washington. That doesn't necessarily scream like lockdown defense for the rest of the year. And, like, where are the big plays from guys like Flip Dixon, Robert Longerbeam, Desmond Benison, and, like, the rest of this defensive backfield? Like, where's the pressure up front? It felt like Will Rogers had all day to throw more often than not, you know?
Yeah.
So where's the vaunted Rutgers D that we've been told so much about and that we expect to see? Like, what do you think's going on there?
I mean, look, we saw some issues last week against Virginia Tech, where it seems to be like they're out of sync, like they're a little slow from getting it together until, you know, they come together at crucial moments during the game, but they let too much go by. They're allowing people to run on them, pass on them. It does seem like there's a lot of holes on there, and some of these playmakers that we were expecting to show up in a big way just aren't there. And you think it's lack of leadership, you know, in the backfield that maybe with losing, oh my gosh, I'm just blanking on his name right now.
Mohamed Toure.
Yes, thank you, Mohamed Toure. You know, he was the anchor for that defense. And
it's true.
And to me, it just looks like there's definitely some disorganization. It's not for lack of talent. It just seems like they don't have a direction right now. And that's what seems to be inconsistent. And I'm not, you know, maybe Mohamed Toure was just that kind of guy. And with the loss of him, it just, everything kind of is in a little bit of disarray. And frankly, I mean, if what we saw last week against Virginia Tech and what we saw this week, this last Saturday against Washington Huskies.
Friday.
Oh, so yeah. You're just not. I don't think it's going to hold up. I do think, you know, Rutgers, you know, Cinderella run could come to an end if they don't get that fixed.
Yeah, they're going to have to really focus on possessing the ball, which they do, and trying to play keep away if that defense is going to be that inconsistent and if they're going to be that porous on the back end at times.
Yep.
Like, they're going to have to be real careful there. But regardless, man, Rutgers survived. Yep. They kept playing. They won the game. At the end of the day, it's just W's and L's, right? So you got to get him credit for finishing and getting it done, even if it's you want to win your games where you don't play well, right? Yep. Find a way to do that. And Rutgers didn't play their best game, and they managed to win anyway. So hats off to them for that.
Absolutely.
All right, next up, we have the number 3 Ohio State Buckeyes 38, the Michigan State Spartans 7. So, John, I got to eat a little crow here. I thought the Buckeyes would be a little hotter right off the bat. I thought they were going to come out really focused. And that first quarter was kind of slow.
Yeah.
You know, they picked it up in the second and third quarters before coasting home and kind of taking it easy in the fourth. But yeah, it was touch and go there for that first quarter. But then Frosh phenom wide receiver Jeremiah Smith happened.
Dude.
He had a 19-yard touchdown run and made a one-handed 17-yard catch for a score in the second quarter. Buckeyes were in a closely contested game until their freshman phenom took over. Ryan Day said about the pair of Smith touchdowns, quote, "It flipped the game. It's where the game turned," close quote. Smith leapt up and snagged Devin Brown's pass with his right hand 3 plays after needing only one hand to make a twisting 27-yard catch between 2 defenders to put Ohio State ahead 24-7 in the final minute of the first half. Smith only had 5 catches for 83 yards, but he made them count as they were all incredibly impactful catches. Buckeye QB Will Howard was briefly knocked out of the game in the first half, leading to Devin Brown's touchdown pass. But Howard came back, and he ended up throwing for 244 yards, 68% completions, 2 TDs, and a pick. So a solid, if unspectacular day on a scary day for the Buckeye signal caller. So we are glad Will Howard was good and able to get back into the game. Happy to see that.
Yep.
Running backs Travion Henderson, Quinshon Judkins were both effective in limited carries for the Buckeyes, who played a lot of different players in this one. And Emeka Egbuka led the Buckeyes in receiving. Hey, Emeka Egbuka with 96 yards on 7 catches and a TD. So there's no question the Buckeyes have 2 wide receivers in Smith and Egbuka who qualify as legit number 1 options. And that's a wild luxury to have. You can't game plan one of those guys out of the game because that'll just set the other guy up with favorable coverage. The only problem there is that there's only one ball to go around, but that's a good problem for the Buckeyes to have. And the defense also played well. Linebacker Mitchell Melton had 1.5 sacks, while safety Caleb Downs had 6 tackles, including a TFL. For Sparty, man, it was a long day. Aiden Childs was 13-19 for 167 yards, 1 TD, and a pick. Buckeyes flat out just ran a lot more plays than Sparty did because the Spartans were so ineffective on offense. Michigan State had just 50 snaps, while Ohio State had 75. Woof. You are not going to win games when it's that lopsided just in possession of the ball. Lynch, Adams, and Carter had limited attempts running the ball. Jerron Glover got caught 4 passes and a TD, but everybody else was kept in check. And yeah, man, what'd you think about this one?
Yeah, it was, it looked like early on in the game that Michigan State was just, they were moving the ball and they were getting into the red zone and it looked like they were about to score, and then they would shoot themselves in the foot and something would go wrong. There was a fumble. There would be, a penalty. It was just not good, just undisciplined. Again, Aiden Childs needs to do better protecting the ball. But he's got talent. He just has to just do, play a little bit more careful. But I got to mention the fact that Jeremiah Smith has had a touchdown in all 4 games as a freshman.
All the games, and he's a true freshman.
That's insane.
It's wild.
And 2 one-handed catches in a row? Like, bro, come on.
He's just fearless, man. Just fearless out there, just making plays, just not even thinking, just acting like it's high school, just doing it, just doing the thing.
It's amazing.
It's wild.
It's not fair. It's not fair.
Oh, man. And just, he's like, he might be the reason they changed the rule and start letting guys come out after 2 years or something, Yeah. He might, I hope not. Because I like the rule that guys have to stay 3 years. I think it's a good rule. It's very good for college football.
Agreed.
But he's probably ready now to do anything.
Yep.
And it's crazy that he is in some ways outshining Emeka Egbuka.
Yeah.
We're talking about him like he's nobody. It's like, this is Emeka Egbuka. This is one of the best players in the country.
Yeah.
This is not nobody that he's kind of usurping a little bit.
Yeah, it's bonkers, dude. I have not seen a freshman wide receiver look this good in a long time. This is incredible. So
yeah, I'm trying to even think of who we'd be talking about. Like maybe Devontae Smith at Alabama or somebody like that. But
but even I don't know. I
don't know though. Yeah, I don't
even know if it's as good as this of what I've seen with Jeremiah Smith.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not knocking Devontae Smith, but dude,
yeah,
this kid is special.
He's different. He's just different.
Yeah, absolutely in every way. So
yeah.
Yep. But Ohio State, they were able to come out and take care of business and do what we were expecting them to do. But it was an odd, slow start.
It was a slow start, and they ended up not scoring as many points as I thought they were going to score.
Yeah.
Because of that slow start. The Buckeyes, though, I still am going to say, John, I don't think they look just like the best team in the Big Ten, but after Texas's sluggish play yesterday, they basically took a half off against a very bad Mississippi State game. I mean, it was a one-score game at half against Mississippi State, and Mississippi State, who got blown out by Toledo by 4 touchdowns, right? And hasn't been able to play with anybody, essentially. So, and then Georgia lost to Alabama. So, like, to me, I know a lot of people just jumped Alabama right up to number 1 after beating Georgia, but like Alabama also like blew a giant lead and nearly lost that game that they had won.
Yep.
So, yeah, I know they haven't played anybody that tough yet, but I just think that Ohio State looks like the best team in the country.
I agree, man. I think it's them, and personally, I'd have to put Texas at number 2 right now.
Yeah, I'd put Texas at 2 and Alabama at 3.
Yep. Yeah.
I think that's fair.
Mm-hmm.
And then it gets dicey.
Yeah, and I think Ohio State is just getting going, man. I really do. I think they're just going to continue to roll and destroy people. They may have one more game where like it seems like they kind of get off track, but I don't think they're going to lose. I think it just might get a little dicey, but I'm not worried about it.
Yeah, it's they're so special on just both sides of the ball. And we're going to learn a lot more in the next month as Ohio State plays a gauntlet with Iowa at Oregon, Nebraska at Penn State.
Mm-hmm.
That's their next 4 games. So those are all tough games.
Yeah.
And the at Oregon and at Penn State particularly are games that are going to challenge them a lot. So
for sure.
At the same time, if you ask me what would I guess Ohio State's going to go in those 4 games, I would say 4-0 because I just don't see, like, you might be able to beat them for a half, right?
Yeah.
But I just think at a certain point, they're so talented that they're just going to overwhelm you with it.
Yeah.
No matter who you are. And I just think Oregon has bad moments. Penn State has bad moments. Ohio State, even when it's not going great, it's about to be going great.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yeah. And friend of the pod, other Max in our chat. Like, again, I wonder what it's like to be a fan of Ohio State, like of a team like Ohio State, where
I don't know. He seems miserable.
Yeah.
He seems unhappy.
You're
bad. And I'm like, you're bad.
We beat Michigan State 38-7. No, we're not that great, man. We're not. I'm like, what world do you live in? Like, I wish that was like a bad game for us. Jeez.
Where you can win by several touchdowns and still convince yourself you didn't play well.
Yeah. Like, come on, man.
I don't even know. It's wild.
What's that world like? Come on, Max.
Yeah, it must be. I mean, it must be something else. But yeah, it's like I'm like, man, you got to see the forest for the trees, dude. You got.
He's not alone, man. I think a lot of Buckeye fans are like that, and it's just crazy.
Which is so weird to me.
Yeah.
I don't. Yeah, it's a weird mentality.
Yeah.
All right. Next up, we have the number 8 Oregon Ducks 34, UCLA Bruins 13. Dylan Gabriel threw 3 TD passes and put on a show while the defense did not allow an offensive TD for the 8th-ranked Oregon Ducks. Lanning praised his QB after saying, quote, Dylan continues to prove that he's a savvy QB. He did a good job utilizing his feet when the first answer wasn't there and moving on to the next look. Defense played their best game yet. After the first series, we figured out their rhythm and what they were going to be doing, close quote. So Dan Lanning loves to tell you how clever he is. After the first series, we figured out what they were doing. And it's like, yeah, and also you've got better players than they do, man.
Yeah.
Just saying. I don't know. I think Lanning is got a little bit of born on third base disease to him. Not saying he's not a great coach. He's obviously a very good coach, but just his whole attitude towards things, I just, don't totally get at times. Oregon scored on its first 5 possessions of the game. UCLA got a field goal initially to cut it to 7-3, but then Oregon took over. And Dylan Gabriel's only real mistake came late in the second quarter when Brian Addison of UCLA had a 96-yard pick 6 to get the Bruins to 28-10 at halftime. So shout out to Brian Addison for making a great play.
Yep.
But it's an absolute indictment of this UCLA offense that they couldn't get into the end zone and only managed 2 field goals the entire game.
Yeah.
Oregon QB Dylan Gabriel was amazing, throwing for 278 yards on 76% completions, just 6.8 yards per attempt, but 3 TDs and a pick. And Oregon ultimately did have some explosive splash plays in the passing game to make up for some throws that were incomplete or completed but ineffective. Running back Jordan James had a nice day with 103 yards on 5.2 yards per rush and a touchdown. Wide receiver Tez Johnson was a beast, going for 11 catches, 121 yards, 2 TDs. And Trayshawn Holden also caught 5 balls, including a TD. And then on defense, Derek Harmon was a beast, going for 5 tackles, a half sack, and 1.5 tackles for loss. So great game from him at the defensive tackle position. And transfer cornerback Jabbar Muhammad was credited with 2 passes defended. Once again, John, Oregon just ran a lot more plays than UCLA did because they dominated possession. UCLA's offense was largely ineffective. Ethan Garbers was just 12 of 20, 118 yards, 5.89 yards per attempt, 0 TDs, and 2 picks. So really rough night for him. TJ Harden did okay in limited carries with 53 yards, but nothing spectacular outside a 21-yard run. And nobody else was effective running, and the receivers didn't really do much because the Garbers only completed 12 passes. So what'd you think about this one?
It's just, unfortunately, UCLA, this is just going to probably continue more or less for the rest of the season. And I feel bad. I feel bad. When your offense is only able to put up 125 yards passing and only 47 yards running, that's rough, dude. And it's really, I think there's some skill players on UCLA. I think Gilmer is legit. I think that Garbers can be really good. And Harden and Berger aren't awful. It's just it's the line of scrimmage, man. It's like exactly what we said, and they just do not have the horses at the line of scrimmage on either side of the ball to be effective for a full 60 minutes. They just don't. And so that's the problem. Yeah. And unfortunately, it ends up meaning that like Garbers ends up making mistakes and throws, he threw 2 interceptions, and because he's got to make things happen. He's got to make plays.
He doesn't have, what's he going to do? They can't really run the ball.
Exactly. So he's trying to throw wherever he can. And unfortunately, he has to put the ball in danger sometimes, and that's what happens. And I don't even blame him for that. I'm not, I don't blame Garbers at all for any of the interceptions and all that, because the guy is literally just trying to make something happen, and that's all he can do. He has no help elsewhere. And so it's hard, man. It's tough to watch. I feel for, Bruins fans. I think it's going to be tough this year. I don't know as of right now, like anything that I can say hopeful about the UCLA Bruins. And then the Oregon Ducks
going okay.
What'd you say?
Recruiting's going pretty okay
for
UCLA. Okay. So like Deshaun Foster, if he doesn't have much in the way of a team right now, but at least he's doing something to build a team going forward. And it's not going to be an easy fix. It's just not, because Chip Kelly left a smoking crater where a football program was supposed to be.
Yeah. And we talked about that. So give it some time. Don't write him off this year. Give it a little time and see what happens next year. Maybe he can make some magic in the portal too. So, but Oregon, man. I mean, Oregon looked the way we knew Oregon was going to look, and Dylan Gabriel was, looked like he was in a video game half the time. Jordan James had a pretty okay day, and although I'm not convinced yet that Oregon can run the ball all that well. They don't have to, because they've got Dylan Gabriel and some, really good pass catchers to throw to. But I'm still questioning their rush attack. I'm not entirely sure that they're all that great. I'm not saying Jordan James is bad. I just haven't seen them against anyone that I feel like I'm
openly questioning their running attack. They averaged 5 yards a rush against a bad UCLA team. I don't think they've shown the ability to run the ball effectively. Dylan Gabriel has been the focal point of the offense all year.
Yeah.
It's not like they ran for a bunch of yards on Boise State or Idaho either.
Yeah, true.
So it's been a consistent thing with them not running very well. So that's something they have to, that I think in the big games is going to be tough for them. Yeah. It's going to be a lot of pressure on Dylan Gabriel. Like against when I look at that Buckeye defense, the Buckeyes are the best team in the country right now statistically against the run.
Yep.
What's going to happen when you run into the teeth of that Buckeye defense? That's going to, in a week and a half here. So that's, that's something that's going to be on the table.
Absolutely. Yeah. I'm worried about that. I know Dylan Gabriel looks great right now. But he
looks great. He looks great. He looks like a Heisman contender
for sure. But can they keep that up once they get into some more difficult play? That's what we're going to find out.
Yeah. Yeah. They're rounding into form, and that Ohio State clash is not this week, but next. So I wonder, how focused is Oregon going to be for this Friday night tilt against Sparty with Ohio State on a short week? With Ohio State coming up next week, might be a chance for Sparty to get out to a hot start if Oregon's looking ahead a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
That said, it's Dylan Gabriel, and he's pretty locked in. So, I mean, Oregon, they will crush Sparty. I'm not worried about that ultimately now that they're playing better. But it could be an interesting first half, maybe.
Yeah. I'm thinking the first half could be interesting, especially if Childs shows up the way he's been at times. It could be fun. But then I expect Dylan Gabriel to take over because he's got the experience. He's like you said, he's locked in. I just expect him to be able to take it to him. But we'll see. We'll get into that in the preview for sure.
Yes, in the preview episode, we'll talk about that a lot more.
Mm-hmm.
All right, next up, we have the number 9 Penn State Nittany Lions 21, the still number 24 Illinois Fighting Illini 7. So this game was tied until past the halfway point of the third quarter, 7-7. And even then, Penn State didn't score that TD to put the game out of reach until they got a short field in the fourth quarter. So what I'm trying to say is that simultaneously, this Illini defense showed up in a big way. And also this Penn State offense once again underachieved in a big game. John, I will say I predicted the storyline coming out of this game would be out the play of this Tom Allen defense. And they did not disappoint. After giving up a TD on Illinois' opening drive, Penn State managed to hold Illinois to just 25 rushing yards the rest of the game against a Brett Bielema team that is domination. Penn State tackled Illinois 13 times behind the line of scrimmage and racked up 7 sacks. Just a dominant performance from this Nittany Lions defense. Both teams scored on their first possessions before sputtering for the rest of the first half. So they both, when they were on script, it went well. And when they were off script, it didn't go so well. Penn State did miss a field goal at one point, and then they actually missed one later in the game as well. And the key sequence in the game happened right after that first missed Penn State field goal, because Illinois drove down, and with first and goal at Penn State's 2, Altmaier had the ball sail over his head on the snap, and he had to retreat to grab it. They lost a bunch of yards. Then they lost 3 yards on a QB keeper after that. And then he was called for intentional grounding on third down. And then they missed a field goal. So they went from first and goal on the 2 to not even scoring.
Yeah.
That, and they had a penalty on the first kick, which forced the second kick. So when they actually attempted the kick, it was 45 yards when they had first and goal on the 2.
Yeah.
So that's brutal.
Yeah.
I mean, I feel like that's where the game was lost. If Illinois scores a touchdown there and they go up 14-7, it is a totally different dynamic.
Yeah.
Going forward. And I just think that Illinois offensively didn't recover from missing that opportunity. No. Penn State managed a long, methodical scoring drive out of halftime, which ended up being the difference in the game. And it was all about the running game for the Nittany Lions, as Katron Allen went just over 100 yards and Nicholas Singleton went just under 100 yards for the night. Each had a TD. And that was the difference in the game. Drew Aller had just 135 passing yards, but Luke Altmaier only had 185 passing yards. So Aller was accurate, completing 71% of his passes, while Altmaier completed 64% of his. But with the passing games largely canceling each other out, it was the fact that Penn State could run the ball and Illinois couldn't that was the difference in this game. And John, I'll ask you your thoughts, but first I just got to say, defensive end Abdul Carter was a menace tallying 7 tackles, 2 sacks, 4 tackles for loss. That guy is just about unblockable, and he will continue terrorizing Big Ten quarterbacks every single week.
Yeah. Oh, he's terrifying, dude. Aside from him, the other player that actually impressed me the most was the tight end and former high school quarterback Tyler Warren in that Wildcat package, dude.
Mm-hmm.
That worked so well, very effective. That was a new wrinkle I have not seen yet.
He could get up. He jumped well.
Yeah, I mean, and he was making things happen. He was making great reads on the option. Like, I really liked seeing him out there in that Wildcat package. I thought that was really cool. It's just like I said, it's a new wrinkle that I hadn't seen yet, and I think it works. And I think they need to continue to work with that too, because it was effective.
Yeah.
So, I mean, he's a big horse, and if he has the ability to do something like that, absolutely utilize that. So that was fun. But yeah, man, it really came down to the running game. It was so much fun watching Singleton and Allen do their thing. Like, Singleton has so much power in those legs, dude. It's insane. Honestly, I think, I know Allen had more yards, but I feel like Singleton was the one that really showed out in a way that to me, I think he runs. I don't think he's as acrobatic or as athletic as Saquon Barkley, but I think he's got similar power.
Okay.
And that, to me, maybe it's just me. I love running backs like that. That's why I've also been
your type.
Yeah, that's why I really like Caden Fagan. I know he didn't play well, but like when he's rolling and he's rumbling, that's amazing. So I had a lot of fun with that. That was great, but again, you're right, man. It just came to this like suffocating Penn State defense. What are you going to do especially just against a guy like Abdul Carter? But that defense is well coached. They were exactly where they needed to be, and they did not let Illinois do anything after that opening drive.
Yeah, just about nothing.
Yep.
I mean, they had that one, they got down to the 2-yard line, and then they shut it down from there.
Yep.
Yeah, it was a really impressive performance. I think so. Now those are the good things. Now the 2 negative things, one for each team. What are you paying Andy Kotelnicki for if you only manage 21 points in another big home game? What are you paying him for?
Yeah.
Like, what's going on?
Yeah.
Because the point of having him is that in a game like they played, that Penn State should be scoring 30 plus points, right?
You'd think.
Isn't that's the expectation? That's why you paid Andy Kotelnicki a ton of money to come over from Kansas. So is it that he's not getting it done because of the lack of pass catchers that Penn State has? Or is James Franklin meddling too much again? And not letting Kotelnicki run his best stuff when he wants to. Like, you have to say that's a possibility, because we know James Franklin likes to meddle.
Yep. Especially with his offensive coordinators.
Well, right.
Yeah.
So that's not 21 points isn't going to get it done against Ohio State.
No.
Or USC. It's not going to it's not going to do it.
No. And having your what is it? Harrison Wallace III, 3 receptions for 38 yards.
Yep.
Tyler Warren, 4 receptions for 34. And I mean, Julian Fleming is essentially just like missing. He's gone.
Julian Fleming's on a milk carton, man.
Yeah.
I think he's not what we thought he was going to be.
No. So
I don't know if he's hurt or what's going on. Maybe we're going to find out later that he's been banged up, but like, he definitely is not what we thought he was at Ohio State.
Yeah, and I mean, and Illinois got like a solid defense, so I want to give them some credit here. But like, the longest pass he had was 20 yards, and I don't think that's going to cut it. You're right, like against some of the tougher competition that Penn State is going to be facing.
Yeah, you need to see more explosion in that Penn State offense.
Yeah, it seems a lot more of the same. You're right.
Yeah, even though we keep switching offensive coordinators, but the same things keep happening at Penn State, and so that's something. Like I said, against USC and Ohio State, 21 points isn't going to do it.
Yep.
So can Penn State get back on track offensively? Because we know the defense is going to be great. The defense is going to be there for them.
Yep, absolutely.
But can the offense? And then, John, with Illinois, they can't run the ball. Illinois, Brett Bielema's team, with his supposed the best offensive line. Illinois and Minnesota are really interesting to me right now because they both have these veteran offensive lines coming back, had a bunch of success running the ball last year.
Yeah.
And now all of a sudden, for some reason, even with all these veterans, struggling to run the ball. And what do you think's, I don't know, what do you think's going on in Champaign with that?
I mean, it's bizarre, dude. I don't get it either because both of those head coaches, PJ Fleck and Brett Bielema, like that is their bread and butter is the run game and offensive line, like offensive line play are being outstanding. So it's bizarre. I don't know what to make of it. I've been trying to figure it out with the Gophers and I can't. It's not for lack of like talented running backs. I think it's just there's nowhere to run. There's no holes to run through. Nobody's holding their blocks long enough. I mean, Caden Fagan is a really good running back.
Yes.
McCray is a really good running back. Like they've got talent. It's just not working. But what is working for Minnesota with their running backs is doing these swing passes or screen plays with their running backs and getting them involved in the pass game. And we saw that happen with McCray as well, the previous game with Illinois, and that did work well, but they didn't do that much in this game. And obviously I think it's a little tougher against Penn State's defense, but still, I don't know, man. I really don't know. I have no answers for you. It's really weird. Yeah.
All right. Well, we're not sure, but we're going to monitor that because it is so wild that Illinois of all teams is having trouble running the ball.
Yep.
All right. But I think Illinois, they got a bye week this week to figure some things out. So maybe we'll see them figure something out over the bye week. That's possible too.
Yes.
All right, next up, John. I didn't want to talk about this one. We had the number 10 Michigan Wolverines 27, the Minnesota Golden Gophers 24. So the battle for the Little Brown Jug was a tale of two halves. In the first half, Michigan dominated. They scored touchdowns on two short fields after a blocked punt and a strip on wide receiver Daniel Jackson, both inside Minnesota's 15-yard line. That put Michigan up 21-0 quickly before Minnesota managed to get a field goal on a 2-minute drill to end the first half. It's also notable that Minnesota missed a field goal in this game as the Gophers ended up losing by 3 points. So, Michigan led 24-3 going into the fourth quarter, but the Gophers came storming back with 3 fourth-quarter touchdowns. Minnesota coach PJ Fleck said afterwards, quote, "We are way past the point where moral victories matter to this program. Everyone on our sideline thought we were going to win that game," close quote. The game was decided when Minnesota correctly and legally executed and recovered an onside kick, which was inexplicably flagged for offsides. The replay showed Minnesota was not offsides, but it's not a reviewable call, and thus Minnesota was absolutely robbed of the opportunity to win or tie the game with 95 seconds left from the Michigan 38. The Fox rules official Mike Pereira agreed it was a terrible call. Former Washington and Boise State coach and Fox pundit Chris Peterson went on an impassioned rant after the game about how the chance to win the game was stolen from Minnesota. This is not just vague bad officiating. This was an absolute criminally bad call, which decided the game, period. And Minnesota had already scored 3 fourth-quarter TDs, so it seemed like the Gophers were poised to score another one.
Yeah, Michigan was on their heels, man. They were
reeling.
Yeah.
So I'm upset about this, and I'm going to be upset about this. I'm going to be in my feelings about it a little bit. And I know we get upset when the Gophers lose, but this is like a little different. Because it's one thing to get whipped. Against Iowa, we got whipped in the second half. It happens, right?
Yeah.
We talked about it's disappointing, but it's one thing. But in this case, Minnesota deserved the chance to win the game, and they just had that taken away from them. And that's a really hard pill to swallow.
Yep. It's really difficult. It's something I think, the Gopher fans are definitely going to be upset about for a while. And have the right to be.
Yeah.
Look, we can, focusing, I want to talk about the play obviously at the end of the game, but I do want to also mention, just to play, a little bit devil's advocate, is the fact that Minnesota did not really show up in the first 3 quarters. And
except for in that 2-minute drill before halftime.
Yes. That was incredible. That was amazing. And that was exactly the kind of calls you and I have been hoping to see.
Yeah.
And so that gave us some hope for sure. But overall,
you're right. You're right. It was too little, too late because Minnesota didn't play well enough in the first part of the game. So when they got hot at the end, they were too far. They were so far behind that it made it hard. They needed to catch a break, and they didn't.
Yeah, and this is where I'm talking about, like, coming back to. Okay, the positives are what we've seen with Minnesota in halves of games is that they have the talent to win these games.
Yes.
That's not in doubt at all. The players on the field are excellent. There's NFL talent on this team. It's just the coaches not having them ready to go or in the game or whatever the hell is going on.
You cannot allow a blocked punt. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I interrupted you.
No.
That's the first thing that jumps out at me, like screaming above the line. If you don't have that blocked punt, Minnesota wins that game.
Yeah.
I mean, you don't, and you cannot have a blocked punt. And the Daniel Jackson strip was kind of a freak play, but you really can't have that either.
No.
You just can't as a player. And Daniel Jackson, made up for it with one of the most amazing touchdown catches I've ever seen later.
It was incredible.
He was spinning, like in his right hand was forward, but he reached around with his left hand and corralled the ball to his chest and then put his other arm on it as he fell to it was ridiculous. Yeah. So lots of credit to Daniel Jackson, but like that fumble, man, that's inexcusable. You can't have that.
Well, and it's just having our defense not show up in a better way until the second half. I mean, it just seems like I don't understand what is going on with this team. And we've talked about it last week. It was the same thing. They were together. They were in sync that whole first half. And then they just decided not to show up. And this seemed the same way. Like it carried on from last week. They did not show up in the first half. And then finally they got it together. And it wasn't even until late in the game where it really started clicking. The defense came on.
The defense played well the whole second half.
Yeah. The defense played well the whole second half. But the offense just couldn't get it together until well into the fourth. And I got to say, and I know people have talked about this, we got to get Max in sync, in up tempo more often. Not all the time, but he needs to be up tempo because he
likes going up tempo.
Yes.
He plays, he relaxes. I feel like he thinks less.
Yep.
And just lets the game come to him and take what's there when he goes up tempo.
Well, and that's when he's succeeding by doing that. That's when the run game was able to open up, and you saw Darius make some plays, and you saw Marcus Majors make some plays. Like it was able to happen. You just but we can't. It can't take this long, or we can't take a half off.
If it were me, I would be going up tempo every time you're in third and long.
Sure.
Just have it be like, if it's third and more than 6, we are running up to the line and we're running that play as fast as we can.
Yep.
Because Max seems to do better up tempo and it seems to keep the defense off on its heels a little bit. So that's when I would be going up tempo more, is on third and long, maybe sometimes on second and long. I think that you could do that without making the whole offense be up tempo.
Yeah. No, I agree.
Because I get why PJ needs to do ball control, because he needs to possess the ball, because that's part of how he wins games. That's part of the PJ Fleck theory of winning a game. So he kind of has to stick to that if he's going to win a lot of games. So yeah, but it is frustrating that the first half was so tough. Yeah. And it just didn't work out. Like, you look at Michigan. Khalil Mullings had 111 yards rushing. But that's how Michigan got out to an early lead, along with the punt with the block punt and the strip of Daniel Jackson. And that's the 3 first half TDs. That explains all of them. That's how you got there. But you look at Alex Orji, Minnesota did a great job on Orji. He finished 10 for 18 for 86 yards, not even 5 yards per attempt. 1 TD and a pick. Yeah. Minnesota shut down this Michigan passing attack. Colston Loveland had 4 catches for 41 yards, but nobody else did anything receiving wise. And then by contrast, Minnesota QB Max Brosner completed 68% of his passes for 258 yards, 1 TD and a pick on 6.5 yards per attempt. So not a ton, but a solid day from him. Yeah. But Minnesota, like Illinois, was unable to run the ball really, as Darius Taylor had just 36 yards on 13 carries. He did manage 2 TDs and also caught 10 balls for 52 yards. So he was much more effective as a receiver than he was as a runner. But that's frustrating. It's frustrating. Like, I know Michigan's a great run defense, right? I know they are. But it's frustrating. It's not just against Michigan that Minnesota hasn't run the ball well. Minnesota hasn't run the ball well essentially all year very well. So, like, that's something that they need to do a little better. And then, you know, you look at Minnesota's receivers, Elijah Spencer and Daniel Jackson both did some really nice things. And Jackson sort of made up for his fumble with that one-handed twirling, diving touchdown catch. Absolute highlight reel moment. But it just sucks that it came in at a loss, as Minnesota deserved the chance to win.
Yeah.
And then, you know, on defense, Cody Lindenberg from Minnesota and Maverick Baranowski had 9 tackles apiece. And Maverick also had a pass defended, so good day for Mav. And DN Ja Joyner at 8 tackles and a sack, which is fantastic from a defensive end spot. Huge day from Joyner. And then for Michigan, Ernest Hausman had 9 tackles, and defensive tackle Mason Graham had 4 and 2 sacks. Mason Graham's always a force. He always is.
Oh, yeah.
And there was no, you know, he made his presence felt in this game as well. So this is a tough one, John, because the Gophers really should have had the chance to win and they just didn't get it. But at the same time, if they had executed just a little better in the first half, just either not fumbled the ball, not had a punt block. The block punt, man, I think that's really the difference in the game to me, along with the officiating at the end, of course.
Yeah. I mean, had that happened, it may not have come down to an onside kick. Minnesota would have won this game, period.
Yeah, could have won this game going away.
Yep.
Yeah.
So, and one more thing, why aren't we giving Jaren Mangum more touches?
He's good.
I like him. When I've seen him on the field, I like him more than Marcus Major.
He reminds me of Kobe McCrary.
Yeah. Yep.
He's just a big oversized. And you know what? Kobe McCrary never got enough carries either.
Agreed.
Just a big oversized back who, like, once he gets going, just is going to rumble and be hard to bring down.
Yep.
And, like, pretty good vision and stuff like that. Yeah, dude, I think Mangum is good. I agree. I would like to see him get more carries going forward.
Same.
Because Major has been a little disappointing. It's true.
Yeah, I mean, like, he's definitely, you know, useful. I think he's kind of you know, he can do a lot of things. He can catch the ball pretty well out of the backfield too and make some people miss. He just, it's just, I want to see if we're going to do that just north and south, you know, running back. I feel like obviously Darius Taylor is really good at that too, but like Jaren Mangum, man, I mean, he's just a bruiser, and I want to see that more. I want to be able to utilize that more, and I think we can. We can. So anyway,
I agree with you. All right. Anything else you want to say about the Little Brown Jug game before we move on from the latest pain we had to go through as Gopher fans?
Honestly, no. I want to, you know, obviously I'm still going to feel pain about it. You and I have talked about it. We're not going to forget it, but we're not going to sit in our feelings about it for too long. We're going to try to move on and move past it. So.
We're going to move on. We got a big game this week against USC.
Yep.
That'll be a really big game.
Yep.
And I'm excited for that. And you know what? Segue, our next game
there you go.
Features number 11 USC Trojans 38 and the Wisconsin Badgers 21. So this, John, much like Minnesota, Michigan, was a tale of two halves.
It
was kind of the theme of the week, a tale of two halves. It really was in a lot of games. We'll talk about that. It was true in Nebraska, Purdue too. But Wisconsin was up 21-10 at half, looked to be in control. USC committed 3 first half turnovers, including a muffed punt, but USC outscored the Badgers 28-0 after halftime to take control of the game. So Miller Moss threw 2 of his 3 touchdowns for USC to Jacoby Lane. And, you know, USC overcame that big 11-point halftime deficit in a big win in the Trojans' first Big Ten home game. Moss was evaluated for a concussion at one point in the fourth quarter after he hit the ground awkwardly while rushing for a 7-yard touchdown. But he stayed in the game. So he was, you know, he passed the concussion protocol, which is good. USC linebacker Mason Cobb then returned an interception 55 yards for a TD with 5:04 left to seal it. Miller Moss had a nice day, completing 67% of his passes on 308 yards for a workman-like 6.8 yards per attempt, 3 TDs and a pick. Woody Marks, once again, didn't run the ball very well as he had just 63 yards rushing on 19 carries for 3.3 yards a rush. That's not getting it done in the run game. Yeah. Luckily, the Trojans had the passing game to carry the offense. Jacoby Lane had those 105 yards receiving on 10 catches and 2 TDs, so absolute monster day from him. And then Zachariah Branch and Kyron Hudson and Deuce Robinson all had about 40 yards receiving as well. On D, linebacker Mason Cobb recorded that 55-yard pick six. And the post Tyler Van Dyke world did not start out great for Wisconsin, John, as Braden Locke completed just half his passes for 180 yards, 6.9 yards per attempt, 1 TD and a pick for a QBR of just 33.7. Yeah. Yikes. Wisconsin did okay running the ball, but not great, ending with just 106 rushing yards on 4.2 yards per rush. So Vinny Anthony had a nice day with 3 catches for 70 yards and a score, and Bryson Green at 65 yards. But top wide receiver Will Pauling was shut down completely with just 2 catches for 11 yards. He's the guy USC wanted to stop, and they stopped him. So I don't know, John. This game was 2 different games entirely. Wisconsin just could not capitalize off its good fortune and first half momentum.
Yeah, this was another one where it was kind of interesting. It looked like Wisconsin was definitely, at least on the defensive side of the ball, handling this incredibly well. Because you saw throughout the game, you saw Miller Moss, on his rear end quite a bit.
They harassed him all game long.
Yeah, and which is the key, which is exactly what you're going to need. Any team is going to need to do when you're playing USC. And they seemed to be pretty successful at that. And then obviously, putting up 21 points and seeing that happen with their defense, I was like, oh, wow. Okay. Like, Wisconsin's going to come away with this. I mean, I knew USC was going to score points, but I did not expect USC to adjust as well as they did. And what this comes down to at this point is USC just has a lot of talent at the skill position and that receiver and that quarterback. And Wisconsin just unfortunately, it's a really down year for their defense. It's I think they're pretty okay. They're getting better, I should say, at the line of scrimmage, or at least with their edge rushers. But their secondary is not great. Hunter Waller cannot do everything. And I think that's what's getting them burned. And it was just a matter of time before Miller Moss took off, and he did clearly. So there was some poor tackling going on. Wisconsin made these these muffed punts. One that actually in the first half was muffed by Zachariah Branch, and then obviously Wisconsin was able to recover and then score on the next play. But then Wisconsin made the same mistake and had to pay for it as well. So it's
brutal.
Yeah. So and the other thing that I was impressed with too is that USC's defense really bowed up in that second half, and they did. It became that you saw Wisconsin move the ball, but then it was that bend don't break, man, and they were able to shut them down and not let Braden Locke do anything, and obviously shut down Tawi Walker, Ches Malusi, Yakimelli, Darian Dupree. I mean, everybody for the most part in that second half, which was impressive. So good on you, USC, to get your stuff together in the second half and shut down that running game, obviously continuing to shut down that pass game, and look pretty impressive at the end of it.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, USC is now up to number 11 in the polls, so they're not being dinged much for that Michigan win, because, Michigan's a top 10 team now, or loss, as Michigan's a top 10 team now still, of course. So yeah, USC is on a really good trajectory, and they've got a really interesting road trip to Minnesota coming up this week. Yeah, and I will be excited to talk about that in the preview, because I think that's a game that is a big game for both programs. I think.
I agree. I think so too.
Yeah. All right, moving on. We had the number 23 Indiana Hoosiers 42, the Maryland Terrapins 28. Indiana had 510 yards of offense to Maryland's 401. So both teams, we predicted, John, a lot of points, and we got a lot of points.
Yeah, we did.
We got what we expected, a lot of offense and not much defense. We got a lot of offense and not much defense. Neither team ran the ball that effectively, as both teams averaged about 3.5 yards per rush, although Roman Hemby for Maryland did break off a 75-yard TD. Yeah. But outside of that, they weren't very effective running the ball. Indiana had the more explosive passing offense, though. Curtis Rourke was 22 for 33 for 359 yards, 10.9 yards per attempt, 3 TDs, and 2 picks. He had a QB rating of 80.8 despite throwing 2 picks. That's when you know, man, if you can throw a couple picks and still have that higher rating, that's how you know you had it going on.
Yeah.
It was happening for you. In contrast, Billy Edwards from Maryland, 26 of 41, 289, 7 yards per attempt, 3 TDs, and no picks. So Billy Edwards was pretty good. But, the teams just ran the ball. Like I said, they ran the ball okay, but not great. I use Lawton and Ellison chipped in 93 and 51 yards respectively. But the receivers put on a show for both teams. Surratt, once again, had over 100 yards receiving, leading the way for IU. Cooper and Price both had decent days receiving too. And then, Prather and Felton contributed, but Edwards spread the ball around and neither finished great stats-wise, although both had impressive catches. I like how Rourke bounced back from both interceptions after the first pick, that throw to the tight end to set up that first touchdown on the goal line. That was ridiculous. That was a ballsy. He threw late across the middle and was just like, I can do this, and it worked.
Yeah.
I saw it. I was like, oh God, that could be a pick 6. And then he completed it. I was like, nope, got it done. So Rourke seems to have a good feeling for what he can and can't get away with, which is a good, which is what you want out of your quarterback. You want him to push the envelope just enough without it blowing up in your face. So that was really and the TD right after that was a sneaky play too. They had a wide receiver motion into the backfield and then sneak out in the flat back the same way they came for the touchdown, for the swing pass for the touchdown. So that was a really good play. Maryland looked explosive early. Prather and Felton are both so good, and Prather looked like a man among boys in that first TD catch. I mean, just taking it from people. And crazy stat of the game, Indiana had 4 turnovers. Maryland had 0, yet Indiana still won this game by 2 touchdowns. That's wild stuff, John.
Yeah.
Really impressed with Rourke. That back shoulder fade he threw out of his own end zone to Surratt was ballsy stuff. I mean, he was 2-3 yards into his own end zone, 3rd and long, back shoulder fade, no problem. That is a ballsy throw. Ballsy throw.
Oh, yeah.
And it was knotted at 21 in the 3rd quarter. The game could have gone either way, but Indiana stepped up, got a stop, then scored on the subsequent possession. It was a really nice drive to end the quarter with a touchdown, and Maryland would never really seize the momentum again. So the reviewed called back touchdown really hurt after Maryland subsequently got stopped on 4th down. That was rough for them. It was the right call, but it was a bad break for Maryland. Would have been an unreal catch by Prather. And then on D, defensive lineman James Carpenter for the Hoosiers had 3 tackles and 2 sacks. So, John, what do you think about the Indiana Hoosiers and their performance against Maryland in this one?
Well, I'm going to make one critique about Curtis Rourke, and then I'm going to go off on him.
Hear it.
Yes, he was able to get away with those picks, but that's not going to be okay moving forward. I feel like he's got to definitely be able to protect the ball better.
Oh, he's throwing them up for grabs often.
Yes.
And he's getting away with it because of the teams he's playing against.
Yes.
But he's throwing YOLO shots for real.
Yeah. And he's got some great receivers to come down with it. Yes. Obviously with Surratt and, Cooper Jr. and McCauley, all that, they've got some serious dudes at the wide receiver position, but so he's got to do a little bit better. But at the same time, I love his confidence and his reads. And there's definitely time. I like watching him take his checkdowns and how he sees the field and feels the pocket. I mean, this guy's a stud, dude. He really is. I knew Curtis Rourke was going to be a good quarterback in the Big Ten. I didn't expect him to look this good. And I think I didn't either. exceeded everyone's expectations, man.
He's healthy. He wasn't healthy last year. And he's fully healthy. And you're seeing what a fully healthy Curtis Rourke who can step into his throws looks like.
Yeah. So Indiana really knocked this out of the park with the transfer portal. Curt Cignetti looks phenomenal because of all of this.
The hire of the decade is what he looks like.
Seriously. Like, who would have thought? I never, in the last number of years, I would not have thought that even Maryland would have been, or I guess Indiana would have been a favorite over Maryland at this point in time, because usually you see Maryland have which they do. They have a lot of talent at skill positions.
Yeah, but Maryland's got Maryland speed.
But Indiana has more.
They have more playmakers. They for sure do have more playmakers. Yeah.
So good on you, Indiana Hoosiers. Good on you, Curt Cignetti. I'm very impressed. And their running game, although not like super impressive, it's solid. I mean, with a running back by committee with Lawton, Ellison, and Black, I think they're able to make enough happen to help take a little pressure off of Curtis Rourke.
We'll see what that looks like against a defense with a pulse. Indiana's played a string of terrible I'm all for Indiana. Indiana's doing awesome. I'm excited for them. But I need to see them run the ball against an actual defense before I'm willing to say that they have a running game.
Yeah. Well, and you're right. I mean, as far as Maryland's defense, the thing I was noticing that was just egregious all day was just terrible tackling, dude.
Oh, terrible tackling. And bad. Blown coverages.
Yeah.
Crazy blown coverages.
Yeah.
It was, Curtis Rourke played really well, but his receivers were really open.
Mm-hmm.
Which is good. They're scheming guys open. They're taking advantage of what, Maryland does. But this has got to be, I'm sure Mike Locksley didn't know what was going to hit him. I don't think he was ready for that at all.
No, I don't think so either.
I am sure he thought that Indiana was more of a paper tiger than they are.
Yeah. And that's just not the case.
No. But you know what? I'm not even that down on Maryland, because Maryland's been better to this point than I thought they would be.
Yeah.
So what are they now? 3-2 or something?
Yep.
Yeah. So I'm not down on Maryland, even with this loss. I think Maryland still has games they could win. And, I think they could still potentially make a bowl game. I think that's still all out there for Maryland.
Sure. Yeah. I agree.
All right. Should we move on to our last game?
Yeah, let's do it.
Oh, last thing I'll say. Indiana's legit. I'm glad they're ranked. I want to be on record as saying that. Don't be surprised if the Hoosiers keep winning.
Yep.
Because they play Northwestern next. And they're going to be heavily favored in that game. So we could be talking about the first ever 6-0 Indiana Hoosiers. They haven't been 5-0 since the 60s. They haven't been 6-0 ever. So heady times in Bloomington, man. It's amazing. Heady times in Bloomington.
Good for them.
Yeah, good for everyone, all the Indiana fans, especially podcast super fan Sherry.
Heck yeah, Sherry.
All right. Next up, we have a result that Sherry will be happy about. The Nebraska Cornhuskers 28, the Purdue Boilermakers 10. Because there's nothing the only thing that IU teams like better than the only thing that IU fans like better than how well they're doing this year is that Purdue's doing just as poorly by comparison.
Yes.
So it's been kind of a great moment for Bloomington for IU fans on all notes.
Yes.
All right. So this was a close game for a really long time, John.
Yeah,
the score is not indicative of what this game was like. The first half was scoreless and included 3 missed field goals for Nebraska, 2 of which were blocked by Purdue.
Yeah.
So Purdue had a ton of momentum going until late in the third quarter, when the Boilermakers were clinging to a 3-0 lead. So first of all, what in the world is going on with Nebraska's special teams that they got 2 field goals blocked in a half? That's rough, man.
Yeah.
Those are serious breakdowns. And Nebraska's had a couple years of these special teams, really a few years of these special teams errors.
Yep.
Compounding. So that's not a good trend for them. But then the Cornhuskers scored 28 unanswered points and kept Purdue out of the end zone until the Boilermakers scored in the final 2 minutes. So when they finally turned it on, Nebraska did turn it on in a real way. Nebraska coach Matt Rule said, quote, "They didn't flinch. To come off the heartbreak of last week when nothing went right in overtime, in the overtime loss to Illinois, Glad it ended up 28-10, but it was a game we had to fight for. Guys had to make plays. We had tough calls go against us in the first half, and the guys were telling me to keep my composure. Close quote. So Matt Rule openly criticizing Big Ten officials. And I just wish there was another coach in the Big Ten who was willing to do that.
Yeah, it'd be nice.
Who is willing to accept that maybe sometimes you have to say something and get fined. Sometimes you have to get fined. Like, and when you make the money that you make, it's okay if you get fined a couple $100,000 or whatever.
Yep.
You can live with that. So would have liked to see PJ complain, but good for Matt Rule, man. He thought that his team was getting screwed, and he came out and said he thought his team was getting screwed.
Mm-hmm.
I respect that.
Yep.
It's Nebraska took the lead at 7-3 on Rayola's 6-yard touchdown pass to Jamal Banks with 2:49 remaining in the third quarter. Then they pushed it to 14-3 on a 4th down, 1-yard touchdown run by Dante Dowdell with 10:34 left in the fourth quarter. So Nebraska had to work really hard for this game. It was not the one-sided blowout that we anticipated it would be until the very end of the game. Rayola completed 63% of his passes for 257 yards, 9.5 yards per attempt, 1 TD and 0 picks. So a really nice day from him. It ended up being, even though it was a struggle for most of the game. Huskers turned to wide receiver Ja'Cory Barney for explosive running plays, including a TD, while Nebraska's actual running backs had more mixed results on the day. Emmett Johnson had a nice day for 50 yards, but Dowdell struggled with just 21 yards on 9 carries. So wide receiver Jamal Banks led the way for Nebraska with 5 catches for 82 yards and a TD. For Purdue, Hudson Card completed 72% of his passes for 7 yards per attempt, 1 TD and a pick. But Purdue is unable to run the ball successfully against Nebraska as Maccabee and Reggie Love were both shut down. John, what'd you think about this one?
Yeah, this was odd. Yeah, it was very odd.
Yes, it's a strange game. That's a good way to put it. Odd.
Yeah, not expecting this to be that close into the fourth quarter. And basically no one scoring. I know Nebraska was able to score a touchdown in the third, but it was still just, it was bizarre. There was also an insane amount of pass interference calls, dude. Like it felt like every other play at one point, especially I think in the second half, it was like, it kept coming, and especially on Purdue, frankly, is where I noticed it.
Yeah.
So that again, Purdue's defense falling apart, undisciplined, with a head coach like Ryan Walters is bizarre to me. I can't make sense of that.
And now Purdue just came out and fired Graham Harrell, offensive coordinator.
There's more news. Yeah.
So that's, dude, I don't know how I feel about firing your OC midseason. Because, like, unless you feel like you have someone else on staff who's going to be better at calling plays, like, is that really an advantage for you? Or are you now putting a bunch of pressure on some staffer who's never done it before and you don't know if he can do it or not? Like, I get that the Walt Bell thing isn't working. I said Walt Bell was a bad hire the moment he was hired. We said that on this show.
Yes, you did. Yeah.
And my quote was, and I'm going to say it again, if you can't score points at USC, then you're not scoring points at Purdue.
Yep.
Period. And so Ryan Walters made a big mistake hiring Graham Harrell. And it's put his tenure in jeopardy, quite frankly.
Yep.
But that does not excuse the defense for being so bad.
Yeah.
Like the fact Ryan Walters, that defense is his baby. And it is weird that they are struggling so much on that side of the ball. It's tough. It's tough to watch at times. I don't know where it goes from here for Purdue, John. I think they're in the worst shape of any. They're in worse shape than UCLA, I think.
Yeah, and Northwestern. I think
and
Purdue,
Northwestern, yeah.
Yeah, I think Purdue is definitely at the bottom of the conference right now.
Yep.
Something has to drastically change. And maybe that's why he fired Graham Harrell. Because he's just desperate. It's a desperation move, clearly. Anyway.
Huge desperation move.
But maybe it'll shake something up. Again, for me, it's so hard to watch, and watching my guy Hudson Card, who is very talented, struggle like he does, and it's not his fault. It's not his fault.
He played pretty okay in this game.
He played pretty okay, and I think
the pick wasn't good, but other than that, he played pretty okay.
Yeah, and if he had, a better coaching staff or a team around him, I think he could be lights out. But unfortunately, he has stuck with Purdue, and this is the way his career's gone. But
he's like Colorado without the receivers. Purdue.
Yes.
It's like they have all the pressure on Hudson Card, like he should do, or Sanders, but he doesn't have any of the talented wide receivers to throw the ball to.
Exactly.
It's hard. It's hard to watch at times.
Yeah, it is. But good on Nebraska for finally getting out of their own way and making it happen in the fourth quarter and able to pull away with this, which is exactly what they should do. They kept their nose to the grindstone and they were able to pull this out and take off. It just does give me some pause that it took this long against a really bad Purdue team. That
really bad Purdue team. That's not, they played really poorly.
Yeah,
like this is, if Nebraska's playing anybody else in the Big Ten, do they win this game?
Probably not. Or it'd be just by the skin of their teeth if they did. Yeah.
So Nebraska's pretty lucky that they caught Purdue when they did, or that Purdue was the team that they caught when they did, when they had this bad of a week on the field. So
you can't do that again.
No, you can't. And I think Nebraska's got some tougher games coming up, I believe.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Nebraska's playing Rutgers next.
Oh, that's a big game.
That'll be a big game.
Big game.
Yep.
Yeah. I'm excited to preview that one.
Yeah, that'll be good.
I forget. Is that one in Lincoln or Piscataway?
Let me see here. I think it's in, I feel like it's in Piscataway, but I could be wrong. One moment. No, it's actually, it's in Lincoln.
Ooh, that's big. Mm-hmm. That's big that they get that one at home, I think.
Yep.
That could be enough for me to swing. We'll see. I'm not teasing. I still need to go more in depth before I make my picks for this week, but that's definitely swings it a little further in Nebraska's direction before we start.
Oh yeah.
Knowing that's going to be a home game.
For sure.
And Nebraska's obviously got a very nice home field advantage.
Yep, definitely.
All right, John, we got through reviewing all these games.
We did. Now it's, we'll turn the page, we'll move on.
It's a new week.
It is. We'll see what goes on. Good luck to everybody out there. Glad some people had a fair game called by some refs and that you got to experience that. So congratulations to Michigan. Good. And
but we're never forgetting this happened, Michigan.
We're never forgetting this happens. No.
We're never, we're gonna be bringing this up. Like our friend Reek and Raider from the chat.
Yeah.
Our friend of the pod. And I was just like, man, I'm gonna bring this up the next time we play. It's gonna be a thing. I won't talk about it till then. I'll let it go. Let it go. But then I'm going to bring it up again when we play them again. I don't think we play them again until 2026. I've already got that one circled. I hope PJ does too.
That's right.
Yeah.
Well, all right. Well, if you want to find We Live for Saturday, you can find us on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and Podcast Addict. You can find us at Twitter at We Live for B1G Sat. You can find Mike at Alibaba26. You can find me, John, at Norwegian Gopher. And you can email us, We Live for Saturday, b1g@gmail.com.
And if you're still with us this far into it, please like and subscribe. Please like the video on YouTube and subscribe on YouTube. That helps us a lot. We appreciate it. And I apologize again for the audio issues we've had on the audio side. That should be all fixed up this week. So, yeah. All right. Well, we'll be back in 2 days for the preview pod. I can't even wait for that. And until then, have a good one, everybody.